Joining me now is George Conway, a prominent conservative lawyer, a former Republican who has some experience litigating against the U.S. president, having offered legal assistance to the lawyers representing Paula Jones back in her civil sexual harassment suit against then-sitting President Bill Clinton back in the 1990s. George, great to have you on. First, I just wanted to get your reaction to this document in terms of laying out the case, establishing the motive to have reason to subpoena and speak to him, and the documents they're seeking.
My reaction immediately was guilty, guilty, guilty on all accounts. This is actually a pretty good draft indictment. I mean, indictments don't have to contain all the evidence. It basically just lays out the different ways in which I think and hope the Justice Department someday, as the judge in California found in the Eastman documents litigation, that Trump committed violations of 18 U.S.C. 371, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and 18 U.S.C. 1512, which is obstruction of a congressional proceeding, of an official proceeding. And I think they did a very, very good job of just summarizing the different methods by which Trump acted corruptly and fraudulently. And I think there's more than a sufficient basis for the committee to subpoena Trump. And I don't think Trump can sue and try to avoid having to testify, avoid having to comply with the subpoena, but he's going to lose in just the same manner that he lost when he tried to prevent the archives, the National Archives, from producing White House documents to the January 6th committee.
Yeah, say more about this, because obviously this is, I think, the first step in this battle. I think we all assume that Trump will attempt to not comply, and I think he probably will do it in a way that involves a lawsuit as opposed to just telling them screw off, although he might do that too. But why do you think he'll lose?
I think he'll lose because there's no privilege that attaches to a former president from testifying, and none of this is subject to executive privilege. The informational needs of Congress, as the D.C. Circuit held in the National Archives case, and the Supreme Court upheld that, vastly exceed any possible privilege that he could assert. And none of this, frankly, is even privileged to begin with. I mean, he was not acting as president of the United States. He was effectively acting as an anti-president of the United States because he was trying to overthrow the Constitution of the United States. So he's going to lose litigation. The only issue is how long is that going to take? He's probably going to try to sue just so in the hope that he can run out the clock to January 3rd when a new Congress takes its oath of office.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they noted that Theodore Roosevelt line, right? That, look, once you become an ex-president, like, you're just a dude in the eyes of the Constitution, which is, I think, actually an important point. And they say this in the subpoena, that even sitting presidents, including Abraham Lincoln, Gerald Ford, famously, also testified before Congress. Further, both former and sitting presidents, including Presidents Nixon, Tyler, and Quincy Adams, have provided evidence in response to congressional subpoenas. There is a long history here that they're drawing on.
That's right. I mean, they referred to Nixon. Well, Nixon had to produce the tapes, and he was president at the time, and these were tapes of conversations that took place in the Oval Office. So, I mean, and there he wasn't, he was just committing minor crimes compared to what the president of the United States, the former president of the United States, is accused of committing here.
You mentioned that obstruction of an official proceeding, and I keep coming back to that because it does seem, there's such a strange thing between the mismatch between the magnitude of what was done here and as laid out in the subpoena and I think in the committee's testimony and even what we just saw in real time, which I think everyone understood at that moment, most people understood, and what that technically amounts to in terms of a prosecutable, indictable, convictable crime. But the obstruction of the official proceeding does seem quite clear just based on what we have so far.
Absolutely. I mean, the obstruction statute requires proof by the government that the defendant corruptly intended to and did interfere, attempt to impede or block the functioning of an official proceeding, and you can do that by lying under oath in before a congressional investigation or to FBI agents or whatnot. But this is just. This was the ultimate serious act of the ultimate, the ultimate attempt to obstruct the ultimate official proceeding. This is the official proceeding necessary but for the transfer of power in a democracy. And he was trying through every method possible, fake electors, inciting violence, lying to the public, coercing his vice president, coercing state officials, trying to do everything possible to block the most important official function we have as a constitutional democracy.
Yeah, it's the top of the hierarchy of these functions.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you know. And also, there's also finally a sort of, to me, there's an investigative aspect here, too, which is important, which is the committee has gotten a ton of information. They've taken a ton of testimony. They've got a lot of documents. It does seem possible there's just stuff that they haven't gotten that is still in the possession of Trump that may be even more incriminating.
Yes, and who knows? Maybe it's in the hands of the special master in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. We don't know. Yes, I mean, it's perfectly understandable that they subpoenaed him for all relevant documents, and maybe there's stuffing. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he was hiding the documents. I don't know. There's a lot here we don't know, even though there's a lot that we do know that I think is sufficient enough to convict him of multiple federal offenses.
All right, George Conway, always a pleasure. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much.